would share with him my perspective of freedom, and then we would like to listen what he has to say and what is his narrative about freedom of speech. So welcome, Dr. Elst, and thank you for taking time out. And it has been a wonderful, we have been spending time together for the last couple of days, and absolutely you have some marvelous ideas. One thing which I think, after looking at all the debates media is showing in India, and when we see people like Kanhaiya Kumar speaking out from JNU and then advocates the freedom of speech, and when he claims that his voice is being suppressed by people, and people doesn't mean by the state, but he says if he speaks out, he doesn't have a trust in law and order that they are going to protect him as a citizen of India. Doesn't matter what he speaks, whether he speaks against India or he speaks against the state. That is still a matter of debate in Indian media. But what I feel, that it doesn't matter whatever he is being an Indian citizen, he should be protected by law and order, by the Constitution of India. So with that, that is what anybody would think in that direction, no matter what he speaks. So in my view, in order, the freedom of speech means you have to provide any individual a protection of his life at least, so that he can speak out fearlessly, and he doesn't need to think before speaking that his life is on the under some threat, or he is risking his life if he speaks out something. So that's a simple, simplistic view of freedom of speech. I would like to listen what you have to say and what's your ideas.
Well, at the popular level, it is indeed always possible that someone takes the law into his own hands and takes revenge on you for uttering a wrong opinion, or an opinion he doesn't like. So that risk is always there, and it is arguably a bit bigger in India than in the West. But a problem that we can address, that is not just a law and order problem, that is a matter of principle, is when the state interferes with freedom of expression. Now this in India mostly takes the form of the application of Article 295A of the Indian Penal Code, which prohibits any word or act that insults a community of Indian citizens or its religion. This article was enacted in 1927 after the murder of Swami Shraddhananda by Muslims. You see, he was a member or leader, spokesman of the Arya Samaj, also one of the founders of the Hindu Mahasabha. But you see, the RSS leadership already had established a tradition of criticizing Islam, because they wanted Muslims to reconvert to Hinduism. Now,
and how did you get that from?
Well, you see, in the Satyartha Prakash, the founding book of the Arya Samaj, you already find a first critique of Islam. In fact, to my knowledge, the very first one in Indian history. Still rather clumsy, but okay, you see, it set the tone. Then you get something more sophisticated from the hand of Pandit Lekram. In 1897, he was murdered for that. And so this happened several more times. In 1926, it was the turn of Swami Shraddhananda to be murdered. He had been active in the reconversion of Muslims.
So if you allow me, I will just interfere once. So when we see these incidents, and this has happened like in last few years, a lot of lynching happened in India, and that made India look bad actually in international community. And my question is, when we talk to the state, or when a state gives their interpretation of those lynching, they say they are individual cases, people took law and order in their hands. The same way, we cannot generalize it that it happened because Muslims didn't like particular one Hindu saint. there might be an isolated incident that some personal individual Muslim may not like him and he might have murdered him or killed him. Similarly, there are other cases around where the law and order is not in the control of a state and some individual finicky guy goes out and kills few people. And that is what exactly worries me, that it's not a matter of individuals who are taking law and order in hand. It's more of a matter of a state providing protection to somebody who is not being violent, who is just speaking out his mind.
In this case, in fact, strictly speaking, it is the Indian state that is not enforcing Article 295A as follows. You see, it is claimed, at least in the news media, and I think mostly wrongly, but it is claimed that the lynchings you mentioned are by Hindus worshipping the cow and taking revenge on Muslim cow smugglers for their disrespect to the cow. Now that actually would fall under Article 295A, in which case these Muslims would be guilty of insulting Hinduism. However, the law is never applied at all. In this case, in fact, mostly it concerns cases where people are simply protecting their poverty, because cow smugglers just steal cows, any cow they can get, and so for a number of people, cows are their livelihood. So people defend their livelihood, whether it is cows or anything else, and whether it is in India or anywhere else.
I understand.
So that is a different issue than freedom of expression. But yeah, I mean, it's of course a question we can talk about. That is true, and it is a general law and order problem. Whereas the issue of freedom of expression and repression against it is a rather specific problem, where India has contributed something very specific. You see, it effectively implemented a law that nowadays would be called against hate speech. You see, against targeting a particular community, namely on the basis of religion. Now, in 1927, after the murder of Swami Shraddhananda, the British government decided we have to stop these religious polemics. We have to stop people from criticizing Islam, like Swami Shraddhananda had done. So, in fact, it was a measure against Swami Shraddhananda posthumously, and so to prevent later similar criticisms. So in a way, you see, India was ahead of all these modern Western states, or of technology giants like Facebook nowadays, who enact censorship measures to protect Islam from criticism. So originally this was a law meant to protect Islam from criticism. Though it is formulated in general terms, it concerns every religion. It took decades before Christians and Hindus discovered that they too could use this law. So we have, for example, a prohibition on the Dan Brown's novel, The Da Vinci Code, which wasn't liked by Catholics. We have the use of this law by Hindus against Wendy Donnaker's book, Hinduism and Alternative History. There it didn't come to a trial. Why? Because the Hindus only threatened to use this article and threatened to start a trial unless the publisher would pulp this book, which he did. However, in the modern age, this is totally anachronistic, because you can easily put the book on the internet and then anyone can read it anyway, which is what happened. Moreover, another publisher has republished the book under a different title, so the book is available anyway. It was a very silly threat by Hindus, but so at any rate, it proves that they too now know how to use this law.
My question is it being used and interpreted in India the same way freedom of expression, like it's that term being used in Europe, European countries, or America? If it is not, what's the reason, and what do you think would be the solution? Because that will
Yes.
simplify a lot of things.
Right, well, in principle it is, I mean, the law system is largely still the British law system.
Mhm.
An amendment here or there, but the overall framework is the British law system. And so the difference is not really very substantial.
Mhm.
In this case, India has made a somewhat stern variation on laws that exist in many countries,
Mhm.
namely this, against insulting groups of people, laws which now come into force very much again, or in extra legal ways, like for instance the censorship by the technology giants,
Mhm.
that effectively apply the same prohibition on perceived insults against religion.
Mhm.
And you see, they effectively have the kind of power that states have, because everybody's using them. So in that respect, I wouldn't say India is all that different. I would say, however, if you are risking it in India to criticize a religion, you run some real danger, because this is in India a non-bailable offense.
Mhm.
That is to say, if someone accuses you in law, then you practically cannot escape at least going to jail for a number of weeks.
So what you're
rather
telling
than
me-
simply sitting at home and awaiting your trial. So, the law has teeth in India.
So what you're advocating is that freedom of expression is there. It's just somebody has to differentiate between a hate speech versus your agitation against the state.